So, good morning. Thank you for joining. Today, we'll be trying to understand a project implementation, how exactly a project implementation is performed with respect to Pega as a tool of focus. We'll understand how exactly, what implementation methodologies are utilized in developing a application or enterprise application in Pega. How exactly it is done is our motive for today's class. Well, to start with, let us say, if you want to build anything, for example, if you want to build a house, you have to have a land. I mean, in the sense that is a basic requirement, yes or no? If you want to build a house, to construct a house, you need to have land. That is a basic requirement. Of course, once you have the land, you need to have a plan for it and things which follow along with that. Do we understand like to achieve anything, you should have a requirement? Does it make sense, guys? Right? We need to have some requirement to perform something. For example, in order to reach office, I need to have a commute mechanism. Could be bus, could be train. That is a requirement basically. Same thing is true when you're trying to build a enterprise application. For example, if you are hired by, let us say, a top bank, let us say SBI or someone, HDFC or anyone. So once you go inside that bank, once you're onboarded as, let us say, a Pega developer, you need to be given a requirement to build something. For example, there could be room for improvement in their existing processes. Let us say they are trying to provide loan today in HDFC Bank and it is taking around a lead time to wrap up a given loan process. Let us say it is taking around 3 months from inception state to closure of the client. It is taking 3 months. So once you are onboarded, you would be given a project to build an application which kind of reduces this time. Ultimately, the customer is only interested to see how fast you can give him his loan. He's not worried you are doing it using Pega or you are doing it just with hard coded hard copies. He's not worried about it. All he wants is reduced lead time. Lead time is nothing but the moment you a customer orders for something and till it reaches him. For example, if I order something on Zomato, the amount of time since I ordered and the amount of time it takes till the order reaches his plate is the lead time for that product. Same thing is true for loan. Do we agree? Do we understand what is lead time? So all that customer is interested is in reducing his lead time. However, from organization standpoint, for example, from HDFC standpoint, you should be someone who can reduce this lead time, at the same time save some cost for the company. Your implementation should be in such a way that it reduces the cost as well as improves the lead time. It reduces the lead time as well as cost effective. This is a solution which you will be designing. Of course, to once you got into any organization, a project will need its requirements. There will be requirements which are necessary for you to build anything. The first piece of any project is requirements. What are the requirements? For example, they want to build a loan application, let us say, for certain properties which are in a given area which is a high risk profile. You have to build a loan application for that. Then you need requirements for that. What are these properties for which they are trying to build? Stuff like that. There will be those will be under requirements where you will be receiving them. Once they give that to you, all you have to do is you have to analyze them. So analysis is something which you have to do. There might be a requirement someone might ask you to build a rocket to send to Mars, but that is the requirement. You will analyze and tell whether it is feasible or not. That is not something which is feasible within Pega. In the same way, when they try to give you a requirement, you have to map those requirements within Pega and see if those are doable. That is what analysis phase covers, where you will analyze those requirements. Once you analyze that, the next thing is you of course have to see is this if this has to be incorporated into as a new application, or you have to enhance the existing application. In the sense, the requirement which has come, is it something as part of a new application which you have to build? Is it a new loan process or new application which you have to build, or there is already an application to which you will have to add these changes? That's something which you will try to figure out. Of course, many parties will be associated with this thing. You will be visualizing and checking. First you have to understand, as part of analysis also you would do it, but later once they give you a clarity of where exactly this particular piece or application resides, you will do something called as what are the supported features, what are the supported features or current functionality your application supports as of today. That is something you will have to understand. You'll have to figure out what exactly it supports as of today. As part of a project, you will have to understand that. Of course, in the requirement phase, someone who will be very important for you to deal with is the BAs. BA stands for business analysts. Business analysts are the people who are going to give you the requirements. They are the people, they are the in your team, you will have business analysts who will be reaching out to the customer and getting the requirements from them, and then they will be simplifying that and giving it to you. They are the people who will be gathering these requirements. They prepare the requirements. Very important. They prepare the requirements. Once they get it from customer will just say, hey, I want this application. But that is not something a developer will understand. You and me as developers, we don't know what exactly the business means when they ask something for. It's the duty of a business analyst to simplify that in a way that a developer can understand. For example, the customer might say, hey, I want a certain field on my screen. It's the duty of business analyst to identify in which flow, in which screen, at which place this particular field has to be placed. He or she has to build a wireframe. A wireframe is nothing but a prototype, a sample screenshot of where exactly this is expected, and he should give it to you. Based on that, you can do that implementation. Very important aspect is questioning business analysts. You should have zero hesitation in asking questions. The more the questions you ask, the better the developer you are, especially to the business analyst. All they are supposed to do is clarify your doubts. Their core job is that. A lot of people face, I mean, most of the clients I work with, they are, they are having challenges because in the implementation, because they didn't ask right questions when the requirements came to them. And many people fail to understand that, so they always feel like, oh, I'm not able to implement this. But did you ask right questions to the business analyst? In the sense, when they ask you to implement this, why is that you are trying to implement this here? There might be a better solution. As a Pega developer, you know what what are the strengths and weaknesses of Pega, because you are trying to build this application. You know what are the features Pega comes with. Sometimes business analysts might agree to something and come up to you and say, hey, I want something like this, but that is not something which is, but that might not be something which Pega supports. You should be upfront and help them understand, like, this product has this limitation, it is not able to achieve such and such thing. For example, they want a certain Java code to be implemented, and which is really stringent and it uses latest JDK version or something like that, which is not something Pega supports. So we should be understanding that and telling them upfront, sorry, this is not something Pega will be able to handle because it's a limitation for Pega. We are not able to do it. And you shouldn't have any hesitation with that. Of course, you have to understand what is the requirement and always come up with an alternate solution to that, so that you can provide an alternative for the customer. So they don't go back and say, hey, this is not something which is feasible in Pega, but they rather say, hey, this is not possible, but of course we can do it this way. Does it make sense? Yes? No? Perfect. So the methodology, from the methodology standpoint, there are two methodologies which are predominantly famous in IT industry, which are followed in implementing any project. Project. First one is waterfall methodology. Waterfall methodology is nothing but, so a customer comes to you and tells, hey, we have this requirement. For example, they might come up to you and say, hey, we want an insurance application, and then these things we want as part of these features we want, like you should be able to perform a quote, send it to a underwriter. And if you go and see any typical insurance application, those are the features they are expecting, let us say. So that is the requirement. Of course you will have requirements as part of this methodology, right? Requirements, you are given requirements, and along with this there is no there are no deadlines as such, in the sense like when exactly they expect it. There is no fixed deadline, or we can say deadlines can be extended. What is a deadline? It's exactly similar to when you're trying to construct a home. The contractor tells you like this is the end date by when we plan to finish it, but I mean we know that it's never met, right? That's what is the funny part about deadlines. They are never met, especially in construction business. They never meet those deadlines. So in waterfall methodology also, the requirements and the deadline can be extended. There is no fixed deadline as such, but it can be, it's like moving post, it keeps moving whenever, based on the kind of challenges they figure out, it keeps moving. Of course you will have something called as status calls. What are status calls? It is nothing but as good as you checking up with your contractor and asking where are we. In the same way, the customer comes to you and checks with you where exactly we are with respect to the implementation on regular basis. He comes and he asks you for that. The requirement, you will have to do the analysis, of course, and there's no specific document preparation as such for a proposed functionality. What are functionalities they are proposed? There is no like fixed documentation. Of course you will have to keep updating the status for on everything whatever you have been doing with the client. We'll be using a tool called Jira as part of tracking these project requirements. So Jira is a tool you will use to track project requirement deliverables. So like there is a saying in English which means, how do you eat an elephant? Piece by piece is what they say. In the sense, when you get a requirement, the requirement might be really huge. Building application is a huge task, but you can't solve it by building the entire application like that. Rather, you can break them down into smaller chunks. For example, let us say you're trying to build an insurance application. You have to break down that into smaller chunks. Could be, let us say it is supporting 3 to 4 case types. You can break them down into individual case type, and again that individual case type can be broken down further based on what all flows are associated in that. We can break them down. Each and every breakdown can be called as a story in your project. That story is nothing but, for example, could be building a flow to you know update routing and perform approval of certain insurance claims, let us say. That could be a story. A story is nothing but a single unit which is assigned to any developer to perform development. In every discussion with the developer, the BA builds these story elements or jiras, specific jiras with these stories, where she breaks it down into smaller chunks and assigns it to a developer. Sometimes you do have team leads who take care of it, but the main point here is you won't be building the entire project, but you would be working on something called as a story. A story will have something called as story points. What are story points? Story points are nothing but much smaller elements within a story. For example, user need to be able to create a case. Let us say that's my first story point. Second point would be he should be able to submit the case to next processing stage could be the next point. The third stage, the case goes to current manager for approval. This is when you get a story, it will have story points. Of course, the BAs are supposed to break it down at this level and tell you what that particular case has to do. How you have to do it, you know it. You can go inside Pega and you can do it. But these steps, BA has to provide. Most of the times, BAs are like busy people. They don't try to break it down to this level. But it's your duty to go back to them and ask them, give me step-by-step breakdown of this particular story which you are asking me to implement. Very important. Does it make sense? Does it make sense, guys? Okay. And the same way, there might be certain statuses which change whenever the user is updating, going from this particular story point to the next story point. So it's also very important for you to ask them and know what exactly should be the statuses. Ideally, they already provide it. If they don't provide, it's your duty to do it. So in waterfall methodology, you get requirements. There is a no deadline is like as fixed. It keeps on. Sometimes it keeps on extending, and you try to deliver a big chunk into a higher environment. So whenever you try to develop, develop your stuff in something called as development environment. For of course we saw this in our classes, but I'm again trying to help you understand. And then once the development is done, they take that wrap rule admin product, put it on test environment for testing team to test. Once testing team tests, it will figure out some bugs and then it will reach out to develop team again, asking them to fix those bugs. Once they have fixed those bugs, again they'll deploy the latest wrap on the latest rule set version into the test environment. Then if the testing team is satisfied, it will move. It will tell, okay, it will give a sign off telling that, hey, whatever testing is performed is good and this is good for further movement. And then the next environment will be something called as UAT. UAT stands for user acceptance testing. In the sense, real users test this in that environment, UAT. Some applications also have something called as pre-prod environment. All these are environments where you can test this application, but ultimately whatever you have developed has to go live, in the sense in production. Production is the prime environment where your real users will be using this. All this drama we are doing is to make sure that application will go and sit in production. That is why we test in all these phases. In development, we develop. In test, the QA testers test it. In UAT users test it. In pre-prod, also you perform certain testing. Sometimes they also call this as a performance testing, where they test for high volume. For example, let us say on a Diwali day, the sale is too high. Flipkart has to test this in their lower environment to see how many people can it accommodate on a given day. For example, on a Diwali sale at 12 o'clock, they are releasing an iPhone for a cheaper price. So there are a million people who are logging in. Is the application able to handle that? What does that mean? For example, if you are inviting someone to your home, let us say you are inviting 1,000 people to your home, you need to make sure you have space for those many people. Yes or no? Visiting a application also is exactly similar thing. Haven't we seen, oh, someone was trying to access it, but the application went down. Especially you see this when the results are out, you will see that your university website, sometimes they go down because of too many people log in exactly at the result time. Haven't we heard of this? Exactly. So that is why you have to do something called as production performance testing to see what is the load your application can withstand. However, so every requirement which you accomplish in waterfall model will go down as a release. Let us say they start with initial set of cases and they release something called as release 1.1. In the same way, after another 6 months, they have something called as release 1.2, release 1.3 again after from 3 months, based on whatever changes are required. So they deliver, let us say, use cases. For example, 10 requirements are nothing but 10 use cases. They had 10 requirements and you delivered those 10 requirements, and they call that as use cases. They had 10 requirements as part of every release, let us say. requirements, and then it's nothing but 10 use cases you are delivering as part of these deployments. However, this has become stale. No one is using waterfall these days. Most of the applications or organizations are using something called as agile methodology, agile or scrum methodology. They call it scrum. You will see a lot of buzz around scrum masters, agile. What do you mean by agile? Any idea what do you mean by agile? Any one of you? Yes? No? What do you mean by agile? Agile stands for, the word itself means to be able to deliver faster, to be able to implement quick, which means this methodology focuses, of course, on implementing requirements, but doing it faster. So Scrum is part of agile methodology. Scrum is part of agile methodology. You always have someone who orchestrates this thing. He is like, when you're trying to construct, there will be a contractor, prime contractor, like that. There will be someone called as a scrum master who will be anchoring any release. For example, any team, he'll be anchoring. These are nothing but they are tech managers who will be taking care of this implementation for your project. It could be anyone from your company who will be a manager who will be taking care of this. And so every requirement which you receive as part of implement, he will be giving points and will be given points by the Scrum Master. In Agile methodology, points are nothing but the amount of time you need to implement that based on complexity, the kind of requirement it is. For example, you have to build a radio button to incorporate male and female. That is one requirement. How challenging is that requirement, guys? Sounds simple. Yes or no? Yes, sir. So he might say for a requirement like that, he would say, I will give it 1 point. 1 point is nothing but it's equal to 1 day or 2 days, 2% days. They call it as percent days in the sense how much would 1% take to build that particular, complete that particular implementation. They'll give it points. So this particular requirement or a story has 3 points. That means it has 3 days. Some requirement might have 15 points, which means it will require 15 days to implement. Does it make sense? Yes? No? Perfect. So the idea behind giving points is you have to accomplish that task within that duration. If you finish within the given points, they will revisit the requirement and reduce the point. For example, if you try to complete some requirement was given 15 points and then you were able to complete that in 8 points, in the sense like 8 days or 16 days depending upon how they have defined it, then they will try to revisit and see such sort of requirements can have a little reduced time. That way it will reduce the cost of implementation for them. That's not something which you have to worry, but just remember that this is how the methodologies will be there and this is what you will be using. And in this thing, very important is you will have daily scrum calls. Scrum calls are nothing but these are status calls. Okay, bhai, what are you doing? What are you up to? Is there the reason for scrum calls every day is to understand where you are. Is there something blocking you, or how exactly we are progressing in terms of your given task? You will have every day in Scrum, in a Scrum methodology. Most of like 95% of projects today they follow Agile and Scrum. The percentage could be much higher, but I'm just taking a approximation. And 95% of projects they follow the Scrum methodology, of part of which you will have a Scrum call every day where they will be asking you where exactly you are with your given stories. You will be assigned certain stories. I mean, you don't need to be worried. Is it if it is like something you have to be worried? No, not necessary. If you know your subject matter, I don't think there will be any issue. You'll be able to tell. Like for example, if they have asked you to build a certain flow, you can tell them, okay, I have completed the initial stages, which is create and process. Now I am on the delivery stage. Right now I'm having challenges in integrating. For example, if you're performing an integration, a REST integration, and you're having some security exception while you're doing it, you can tell that upfront. I am facing issues with this thing, such and such thing. And if someone has any inputs on that, I'll be happy to take them. And if you have every team has a LSA, a lead system architect, you can reach out to them. If you have any understanding gap, you can reach out to them how exactly you can, what is the best way to implement a given piece of code in Pega. If you feel like this is not the best, you can reach out to them and tell, see, this is what I have in mind, but if you have a better approach, please let me know. you know that's how it's a collaborative approach, is what everyone calls it. So you should be very open about where you are and where exactly you stand. That is how you'll be able to learn faster in a given team. But this methodology is something you will be using, and you will have daily calls where you'll have to you have to talk about where exactly you are. And of course, as part of this call, you will have your entire team, you will have your BA, everyone, and it's a very good forum for you to bring up. For example, a certain piece of requirement is not clear for you, you can bring that up in these calls and tell, hey, whoever is the BA, so such and such person, this is something which you have gathered, but there is no clarity in terms of what exactly this particular statement means, or where exactly this particular piece it goes in. That is a very good forum to bring that up. Also, a best practice is, whenever you are given a Jira is nothing but like a case, which gets created. So in that Jira, there is a comment section where you can put those questions and ask question to the whoever has raised that Jira. Could be the business analyst. Tag that to the Jira, or take those questions and drop an email to that business analyst asking, hey, you have asked to do this, but these things don't make sense. Can you help us understand or break this requirement much further? Does it make sense? Yes? No? Of course, your team will have someone called as a team lead, you know, your prime point of contact. Before you reach out to anyone, it's always good to contact him, so he will route you to the right person who will be the best, who will help you answer your query best. So it's always good to reach out to your team lead, or he could be a lead architect also, or LSA also could be your team lead, no issues. So if you don't want to go to the BA, sometimes the BAs are like, they don't want you to engage them directly. So you can first reach out to your team lead, ask him like, I'm having this particular, understanding issue with this particular requirement. What do I do as part of this? So he will suggest you, okay, you can reach out to this BA. So a given project can have multiple BAs based on whoever is responsible for that. He can route you for them. Or sometimes these queries might be pretty common and he can help you answer them even before you go till that. Does it make sense? Yes? No? Perfect. So in this thing, the timeline is kind of fixed. We have fixed deadlines in Agile methodology. They call it as sprints. You know what is a sprint? When you try to run in open ground with a fixed, you know, perimeter, then you are sprinting. Like we do that sprinting. The same thing applies here. Like there are fixed deadlines for the sprints. Every release will be called as one single sprint. So one single sprint lasts for 2 weeks. This is same across the world wherever you go. One sprint means one sprint is equal to 2 weeks, which is not 14 days but 10 days, because 2 days are holidays. It's very important. One sprint is equal to 2 weeks, which is 10 days, five working days for each week. Very important. So this will be something which will be giving you a foundation in with respect to understanding, like what exactly you can expect once you go out on that floor, right? In a sprint, you can have like 10 requirements. So let us say you have the first sprint. first sprint you go in, you have 10 requirements, and let us say you have 5 developers in your team, right? So each developer can take 2 requirements based on the complexity. Does it make sense? So what happens is by the end of 2 weeks, each developer takes 2 requirements, let us say, right? And then you are able to accomplish for that given week. You have to complete, and as a team you have to complete all the requirements by end of sprint. Sometimes what happens, you are able to accomplish your task faster. You can lend your hand, your help your team out, because you guys will be discussing a lot. Because when you're developing, there is a lot of collaboration you have to do with the fellow developers. You have to talk to them and understand. Sometimes the implementation you are doing, maybe it is really nice, and you should let them know so that they can also do something like that. That way your code is clean, the development you're doing is really clean. Sometimes they might be doing something really nice, it's always good to collaborate, talk to them about what you're trying to do and understand what they are trying to do. It always helps you build a bond within the team, and also helps you understand where you are and where exactly you guys are heading towards. Does it make sense? And it's very important that you should never miss deadlines in a sprint or in a scrum. It's sometimes it's inevitable, you can't help that, but it's always good on your part to not miss deadlines. So you have to understand that for a given requirement you should be able to give the estimates exactly, because if a requirement is given, they will be asking you estimates. Hey, see, there is this particular section you will have to develop where this field should be there, and on click of this particular field, this particular operation has to be done. So you have to incorporate, how much time would be needed. So that estimation you should be doing properly. When you give the estimate properly, then you will be able to deliver it on time. Does it make sense? As good as these contractors, whenever you go to build something, they give you some estimate, but end of the day it ends up being like 6 months extra, which always disappoints you, doesn't it? Like you told it will be coming at this point of time. Same thing is true here. So always be very clear about your requirements. They might be asking too much, so always break it down and tell them, say, we are trying to do these things, and it's not ideal to achieve that within the given time frame which you are offering. Of course we will try our best, but it's always good to be upfront and tell them, okay, these are some things which we won't be able to accomplish in this sprint, initially during the start of sprint, so they have a clear understanding that what is going to be delivered. So they don't believe that, okay, this is also coming as part of this particular release, and then at the end of the sprint you are like, oh sorry, we were not able to accomplish it. Not good for anyone. So it's always good to forecast that. Can you be 100% sure about that? No, sometimes some integration fails and you'll have some issues which come in, which is fine. You have to always have something called as, a buffer. A buffer for, like, just to make sure, like, if you miss out something, you should be able to incorporate it. Giving this estimates is very important. Of course, you will be working with your team lead, your lead architect, to understand how exactly this can be given. But have this in mind that you should always have that. Never go with your gut feeling that, okay, I think I can do it in a half a day. No, never go by that. Always try to keep your ears open. Always try to listen first before you react, is what they say. And whenever you feel like, committing to something, always count till 5 so that you can, you're sure about what you're trying to commit for. Once you commit, you can't take that back, especially with timelines. It disappoints everyone. When you don't meet that timeline, it always disappoints. It's like you ordered a burger from a certain restaurant and it didn't come to you on the desired time. Of course you would feel disappointed. The same thing is true here also. It's as simple as that. Does it make sense? Perfect. So also, as part of any requirement which is given for you, you have to perform something called as unit testing. What is unit testing? It's a testing which we did for each and every, work object which we created. We tested that. Individually, we verified that functionality. For example, we implemented routing. We ran a work object and we saw if the routing is happening properly. If it is failing, what is happening? We traced and saw, okay, it is routing properly. If it is not routing, we fixed it. That is unit testing. You created one work object to see, verify if that is working fine. We have to test. It's always good to test both positive and negative cases. Test for both positive and negative cases. Sometimes when you're trying to work on an existing application which is already there, there will be cases which are already existing in that, right? Which are called as in-flight cases. For example, if you are onboarded into a project where there is already a Pega application, you are working on enhancements, newer requirements which are coming to fix the existing issues in the application. When you try to work in such applications, there are existing cases. For example, when you perform a change from development, it is tested in UAT, it got tested in pre-prod, it got tested. Once it goes live, it should be working fine for both all the new cases as well as existing cases which are there in the application. That means in-flight cases have to be tested in your lower environment. When you build it, when you do your implementation, you have to test the in-flight cases also. Sometimes you will have to perform some changes for them, so you need to factor this thing in, is what I mean. Does it make sense? Perfect. So the future case scenarios also, for example, you build something with today's scenarios, it is something which is able to address. So always try to forecast and see how exactly it is going to turn out for the further new cases which are getting created. Is it going to work fine for them? In the sense, you need to visualize or give a thought about all these scenarios while you are building and you are testing also. You should make sure all these scenarios are part of it. Once you are done with all this testing, you can notify. Once you are given a requirement, you can complete that requirement, do all this testing, take screenshots of all, whenever you're doing this testing, take screenshots of that and put it in a Word document. And then you can notify your team lead or whoever is leading this particular project. You can let them know, hey, I've completed this particular piece of code. So notify your lead once you are done. Right? Once you're done, you have to notify your lead. And then, of course, he will ask you to take a wrap rule admin product, if everything goes fine. Sometimes they review your code. If it is simple code, they would be okay, create a wrap and push it to test. Yeah, because you are a new person, they will always have a review. There will be a lead who is going to review your code and see everything is fine. Sometimes they will give you review feedback comments. Take those comments, try to work on them and see what exact comments they have given. Could be sometimes you have not used a right method. He would be suggesting you a different method. Use that method. Just it should be plain and simple, nothing challenging. Of course, it will help you improve your development skills because he's trying to suggest you something which is smarter, right? Does it make sense? Yes, no, it's as good as, like, when you're trying to work for your math test, you will have your elder brother who has already done that. You always try to show him and he says, okay, you can fix this thing and you'll be much smarter. That's what it is. Review process is all about that, nothing to worry. But it's always good to have that. Once it is done, you will create a role admin product rule which we created in our classes, and then you will deploy it to your test environment, and from there it will go to your UAT environment. From there, once they give sign off, every team gives a sign off, based on which, after which the application will move further UAT and it will go to prod, let us say, right? In testing, as we said, the testers will verify. They'll have set of test cases which they have built only for this thing. There are different testings like regression testing and lot of test cases and test suites they'll be using, which is, I mean, you can try to know it on your own pace, but it's not mandatory for you to know that. But they'll be performing testing on the application to see if everything is working fine. They'll prepare their own test cases. If they find any issues, they'll report that back. They will also create a bug in the jira. You can also create something called as a bug is nothing but a issue which they have found in their testing. There is a defect, bug or defect, both are same. They'll raise a defect on you and then you will have to fix them. So there are different tools they'll be using for that. Few people I mean, in our most of the projects I have seen, they use jira to track these, and you can go whenever there is a defect, they'll give you steps also how exactly they created this issue or how you can replicate that issue. If they have not provided that, you can go back to them and ask in testing, you get bugs or defects. You can ask for the steps how they created this, and you can replicate that in your development environment, and then from there you can start testing that. Okay, that is one thing. And then once you fix that, fix the bugs and release the new jar with fixed issues. Whatever issues you have fixed, release the new wrap to testing environment and it will test them again. And then from there it will go to UAT, where they might be performing something called as regression testing. Regression testing is nothing but running testing on existing work, all the existing cases, a complete testing they'll perform on your application, to see if everything is working fine. Regression testing is something, it can be done in testing phase or in the UAT phase, any phase, depending upon what your team is following, right? You can also notify your BS, they will also perform some testing. And then on a given date, you will have to raise a ticket to deploy this particular changes in production. There will be a release date decided. Then you will have to plan for the production go live. There are instructions you have to give. The deployment, this jar, you can't deploy this in production. There will be a specific team. How to do this deployment, you will have to give them instructions. Log into Pega, use, the Pega button or the configure button. From there, navigate to, application and, distribution, and then import. All these steps, you'll have to put it in a document and you'll have to give them, you know. You will have to raise all the, you will have to raise a ticket for deployment. Raise a ticket for deployment. The tool they use to manage these deployment is something called as ServiceNow. ServiceNow is nothing but it's a ticketing tool using which they track deployments. ServiceNow is something which is used, like most, like 95% of applications today, the enterprise today are using something called as ServiceNow. Very widely used tool, very important. And release team is someone who will be taking care of it. You have to raise the ticket, release team will take care of deploying. You are responsible for providing deployment instructions. The instructions are to be given by you. You have to give them instructions. What has to be done with this particular jar? Sometimes there will be explicit class include which you have to do. So you have to give them clear instructions. It's always good. This is what I follow. I make sure I contact them, like, few days before, and walk through those instructions with them. Help them understand who is going to do the deployment. Go on a call with them and talk about this instruction to them. See if they are able to understand, because if they mess it up, though you have worked for all those weeks for that particular implementation, if they mess it up, that code might not go live at all because they messed it up. But ultimately someone to the blame will be you, because you were not able to coordinate with them and complete that deployment. Does it make sense? Does it make sense, guys? Yes? No? Try to coordinate with release team and try to engage them slightly early so that you get enough time to work with them. Sometimes they will be able to identify issues in your instructions. They'll be telling, "Oh, okay, you're asking us to do this, but in production to do this you will need some another ticket, a spare ticket, where you have to go to that team and get approval." So all those approvals are something, it is always good to engage them early and try to go on a call with them, set up a call with them and understand these things. So it will help you avoid surprises on the day of go live. Usually the deployments of production are done on Saturdays and Sundays. Most of the teams are not available that day, or approvals are not easy to get, because those days managers are on leave, so you can't get approvals. So it's always good to engage them slightly early in the process. Does it make sense? Yes? No? Always remember, after every testing, there is a sign off which is associated with it, and you will have to attach that sign off to your tickets. So remember that there will be sign off. For example, testing team gives you a sign off, user acceptance after UAT. The users who tested that, they will also give you a sign off telling that they have no issues. You can go ahead with production. That is something which you will have to remember. So there are some tools which you will have to use as part of this project implementation. Of course, tools used in Pega implementations. Some of them are, of course, for requirement, we'll be using something called Jira. Jira is predominantly used these days. I don't see anything else. So, Confluence is also being used, depending upon kind of the organization you're in, but most of them are using Jira today. There were early tools also which are like, people use SharePoint also. I don't think that is important, but most of them are using Jira. When you get a chance, try to explore what is Jira all about. It's a simple ticketing tool using which you can create stories, you can create bugs, stuff like that. It's a ticketing tool, that's what it is. For QA testing also, you can use something called as Jira. There is ServiceNow. You can use ServiceNow for QA bugs. Also ServiceNow you can use. You can also use something called as HP, some ticketing management system called HP ALM. I think it's called as ALM. They're not being used these days, but Jira and ServiceNow are like pretty dominant and important. For release, once the jar is available, you will sometimes, depending upon if they are using any specific platforms, you will be using something like Git is nothing but the jar which you created. You will have to put it in one of the directories. Git is one such source repository where you can put that code, like the wrap file you created, you can put it in Git repository or something called as Bitbucket. These are the only important repositories are nothing but it's like Google Drive where you store your pictures and images. Same way for code, these are the repositories. Git and Bitbucket are the repositories where you can store them. So these two are for releases, and then for deployment, of course, Pega is something you will be using, right? In Pega, you have the deployment option from the configure application and distribution. You can go and import that Pega. For Pega, you can use Pega only. So in a team, who all do you have? In the team, you will have, of course, developers, QA testers, your team lead, and also you have business analyst, and you have architects. Could be your lead architect, depending upon the size. For example, sometimes 5 developers, three QA people, and then team lead is usually one, BA is one, lead architect. Scrum master is also there, or lead architect or scrum master, whatever it is you can choose. So integration testing also is there, where you will do integration testing using, when you have to integrate with other systems. We did some integrations, right? Integration testing can be performed using, if you have REST, you will be using something called as Postman for REST integrations is what you will be using. Depending upon kind of integrations you perform, your team will let you know. That's it. So these are like predominantly, from a project standpoint, this is a baseline which you will need to remember. Of course, your dev will have your dev URL, in the sense using which the URL using which you will be accessing your dev environment. In the same way, you will have something for uh, QA, UAT, and prod. And there is also something called as SSO, single sign-on. SSO is nothing but, for example, when you try to log in into your Gmail, for example, I have logged into my Gmail. Let us say, see, I do gmail.com. I can go into Gmail, as well as once I log into my Gmail, from the next tab, I can also click and go into Drive. Do I have to again log in? Yes, no, I don't have to log in because once I sign in with Google account, all the products of Google are available for me. Yes or no? All these products for YouTube, uh, you know, uh, Google Meet, Chat, all these are available. These are available through single sign-on. In the sense, you signed in once, and all these applications are available for you. This is called as single sign-on. Same way, once you log into your applications in your organization's system, then they establish something called as single sign-on, using which, once you log in, then after that logging into any environments is easy because you have already signed into your organization's ID. You can log into any of the applications using SSO, single sign-on, successful single sign-ons. This is something you will understand once you go into the project. This is at a high level what you need to expect once you go into the project, but what kind of project to choose, like in the given market, whatever is entailing to Pega, you can pick it up and you can start doing it. Of course, while explaining any project, be aware of what business it is all about. Like, you can't go into an insurance application and talk about healthcare. No, that's not something which works. How do you understand what kind of business they are doing? Of course, Google it, Google it. For example, if you're going to a healthcare application, understand what is that they're trying to offer. What is the input? What is the output from this given project? You have to understand that. You need to identify, like, some specific line of businesses have specific technical terms. For example, if you go to insurance, there is something called as underwriting, and there are few technical terms like policy, claims, and stuff like that. So understand this even before going to apply for a given project. Understand that, so it doesn't seem like they are talking some foreign language. Does it make sense? For example, like we did our insurance project, right? So to explain your project, you can always choose to say, hey, I have worked on such and such insurance project which is being used by backend operations team. Agents collect details from the customers, and backend operations team opens the application and submit all these details. After the submission, they will have to generate a policy number or a quote premium. The policy number will be generated with the final premium and policy details, stuff like that. You have to build that particular script for yourself and try to read it often and help yourself used to in terms of talking about the project you have built. Does it make sense? Sometimes they'll be asking you, who is your client, who was the client you worked for. It's not necessary, they shouldn't be knowing that. So you can tell, oh, it is a huge insurance uh, giant who I have worked for. You don't need to tell, you're not obliged to tell what company or what project you have worked on before. It's not necessary you have to tell. You don't have to tell which exact client you built a solution for. Don't have to tell that. It's purely confidential. You don't have to tell that. It's not necessary, but they'll be asking, but you can say, yeah, it is one of the insurance clients, or one of the huge banking clients, or could be a healthcare client, like that. Sometimes you get questions like, why did you complete your certification very recently, is what you'll get. I mean, you could always tell that, we got vouchers for clearing the project very recently, and then I was able to, you know, get that, I was able to do that very recently. That is why I completed it recently. Does it make sense? Yes? No, guys? Perfect. So this was uh, deeper understanding with respect to kind of project methodologies they use today, as of today, in implementing Pega applications. And I'm hopeful that that this helped you understand, like, what exactly you should expect as part of a Pega project. If this is understood, I will catch you guys in the next lecture. Until then, keep learning. Thank you.